Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, Friday evening, this is Duncan Barkes taking care of the evening show through until 9 tonight on Talk, the home of common sense. Thank you for hanging around. I kind of feel the next couple of hours, it's that kind of time of the week where it's almost like we need to be opening a bottle of red wine, having a couple of glasses on the go, maybe some cheese, and chew over the political shenanigans, not only of the last week, but the last 24 hours. And we're going to do that as we continue throughout Friday evening here at Talk. I'm Duncan, good to have you along. The number 0344 499 1000. Call that number, WhatsApp that number, send voice notes. We will play them out on the air. My partner in crime for the next couple of hours, and I'm so glad he's in, is Peter Barnes, political strategist, because I want to tap into your knowledge and your expertise regarding political strategy, and whether or not there has been some kind of strategy, whether or not it's a bit of a fluke. If you were advising any of the political parties who put forward candidates at the by-election in Gorton and Denton, what would you say to them? There's so many things to talk about.
Yeah, I would also just preface this. I haven't been to bed in a long time.
Haven't you?
I know. I've been awake literally doing this most of the day.
So are you a bit wired?
No, I've got to say, I could do with 2 bottles of red wine at this point.
We can probably sort that out. So we're going to get into the reads, if you like, of where we are politically. And what I want to do over the next hour or so is get a sense of people who are watching and listening to Talk at the moment. What's your perception of the Green Party? How concerned are you about the Green Party? Because some of their policies, quite frankly, are bonkers. I mean, they've stopped being the Green Party in my book and have become the grotesque party. I'm old enough to remember when the Green Party, I used to interview Green Party councillors and candidates and politicians over the years, and they would come on the radio and they would talk about the environment. They would talk a little bit about, you know, weaving a basket out of Hessian. Then they talk about wearing some clogs. And then they talk about how we should all, you know, just eat turnips for the rest of our lives. None of that happens now because the Green Party has morphed into something, well, utterly bizarre. And what I want to get a handle on this evening on Talk is whether or not this is a blip and it's purely a protest vote with the result of the Gorton and Denton by-election, or whether or not it's something more serious, whether or not we should be concerned that now there is a political movement who promise the world to voters, don't have to work out any sums, are going after perhaps a demographic based on sectarian politics, and actually we are in a disturbing place. So you tell me this evening on Talk, how concerned are you about the Green Party? 0344 499 1000 is our number. We'll get your calls on the air, we'll read your messages out, and we'll play your voice notes out as well. 87222 is the text number. If you're a little bit old school, a bit like me, you still send text messages. You start your message with the word Talk and your thoughts to 87222. Peter, you've not been to bed for 24 hours. You've just revealed that earlier. You are a political beast.
Unfortunately.
A political animal. You are a political strategist. Just give us your, if you like, your headline thinking regarding what it was about 4:30 this morning, wasn't it? The result came in.
Yes, so I would boil it down to the fact that last night was one of the single most important moments in British political history. It wasn't a kind of, you know, a little bit of a realignment. This was tectonic shifts move. Because the Labour Party became the establishment in the eyes of their own voters, and the impact of that cannot be underestimated, because you have so much of the kind of, not just the national issues, but the one thing that a lot of people forget is the local stuff. This was a very hyper-local by-election, which has surprised a lot of people, considering the national problems and the issues at number 10 and Starmer holding on and all this kind of stuff. The impact of Andrew Gwynn's resignation and the kind of the background to the by-election had played a huge role. It's what we call the perfume effect. In other words, it's the stench that sticks around a political party. The Greens, I'm sure we'll get into, but just on the kind of headline bit of it, they managed to put together a loose coalition of the progressive populist left. That should terrify every major political party, because they took votes from all different bits of communities and they solidified them into one movement. They also were able to prove that if parties step aside, a single one could come to the front and voters will vote for it. You cannot underestimate George Galloway stepping down, changed that election on a fundamental level. Also,
and he endorsed the Green Party
and that's
candidate.
the next bit. It is actually the endorsement. So he's saying, like, they gave permission for voters to leave. You know, the blocking of Andy Burnham was officially when the Labour Party lost the north of England, because he was the only candidate, I think, that could have beaten the Greens.
Well, let me ask you about that. Are you resolute? If Burnham had been allowed to stand and Sir Keir hadn't, you know, copped a bit of a strop and said, "You're not standing there, mate," do you think Labour would have held the seat?
I think, looking at the campaign, yes, because there was a lot of shenanigans went along. There was a lot of bad tactics across the board, and I think Andy Burnham's personal brand and his kind of loyalty in that constituency and in that region would have kind of pushed it over the edge. And I do think that is a fundamental mistake. That I do think it is literally that point that Labour lost the north of England, probably forever, realistically, by that decision.
That decision, which was driven by what? Purely self-interest and self-protection by Starmer, because he sees Burnham as someone who might nick his job.
Yes, so it's the idea that the Labour Party sacrificed an electoral win for internal unity, which ironically it didn't do either of those things. But I will say, the Reform also learned a big lesson last night. They found where their ceiling actually is. Their campaign was focused very heavily in the working class areas, which you do think would be natural. However, they did not make any dent into minority communities or other communities outside of the traditional Reform vote. That is a big problem, because the country is not, you know, just one type of voter. They found their ceiling, and that is why you saw people like David Ball today rather throw Matt Goodwin cleanly under the bus over his comments.
Let's talk about that, because David Ball, chairman of Reform UK, was out on they call it the broadcast circuit. He was giving interviews and giving response to Reform coming second to the Green Party in Gorton and Denton. And you're right, he was pretty, I mean, literally, he was quite dismissive, wasn't he?
Yes, he really was. But I think this is the bit where Reform are professionalising, and they're learning to play the electoral math. Because ironically, we might have Brexited, but we've rather imported European-style politics very cleanly into our system now. This is all now about a lot more tactical campaigns and kind of targeting of voters on individual kind of communities, rather than these kind of big, broad, sweeping politics, because it's a very emotive now. Everything is identity-based, more so than it ever has been, on the left and on the right. So, yeah, this idea that the Labour Party had was, what did they say? Our brand is the most impressive. They don't care about that. Voters don't care about that.
Slogan.
It was ridiculous. Who thought that was a good idea?
Who in the real world talks about brands? You might, because you're a political strategist. I might, because I used to get paid to help develop brands and stuff. But, you know, Doris, who's living in Clapham, doesn't... brand? What's a brand?
Yeah, exactly. People want they call it the valiance. Are you able to actually do the job? This was a big factor in this by-election, and the Labour Party got punished severely.
Here's the question. I'm sorry to interrupt you, because you're right. They campaigned on the Labour is the brand for this, all right? Which means nothing to normal people in the real world. How has... And it's not just the Labour Party, actually. Quite a number of political parties use language that most normal people don't. But let's use this example. How have they ended up in a position where they think that's going to work, that's going to be a message that's going to cut through to voters? Is it just because they're in a bubble?
I think there's an element of bubble thinking, but I also think this was a little bit of a test balloon, because if I was a member of the Welsh Labour Party or the Scottish Labour Party, I'd be very terrified right now. Because basically what this was really showed is it doesn't matter if you're not Westminster, you're Labour, you're getting punished. And I think this is really what that may have actually been about, from a kind of take a step back from it, because it's about will the Labour brand even survive the next couple of years?
Let's return our focus onto the Green Party, because, I mean, it's been really interesting over the last several months since Zach Polanski's become their leader, or Dave, because that's his real name, has become their leader. They have risen up the polls.
Yes,
right?
significantly.
Significantly. He has changed the tone and the direction of the party. I mentioned a few moments ago, slightly tongue-in-cheek. They've gone away slightly from, you know, saving the badger or whatever it was, and, you know, saving the planet, to being a very different kind of Green Party. What's your take on where that leaves them now? Is this where the Green Party is going to position itself?
If they don't, they're idiots, and so let's not put it out of the realm of possibility. But I think this was a real kind of proof of concept. Is they had a very local candidate who was not the norm. So basically, they moved away from middle class recyclers. They're not that anymore.
I'm a plumber.
But that's a real kind of big campaign point, because it's fixing stuff. It's people that did something. It is that authenticity point that, you know, maybe Matt Goodwin was not the right candidate for this by-election, and the Labour Party's candidate, I can't remember what her name is, I can't pronounce it more than anything. She ended up being she was a PR agent and all this kind of stuff. That's not what voters want. They want real people, and this is every political party has to wake up to this fact. And I do think the way that they'll move forward now is you will see a lot of coming together in loose coalitions in each kind of race now. Everything's going to be very particular, depends on where it is, rather than having these grand coalitions. This was a very much of a loose arrangement, and it's worked perfectly. So I would keep your eye out on kind of where the little parties are moving and who's backing who. That you were right. The endorsement was a big factor because it gave permission for voters to move, and because we're very tribal.
Yes.
Particularly for the Labour Party as well. The ex-pensioner vote moved to the Greens. That was huge.
Yeah.
The actual age, when you look at the over voting age, a lot of older people tended to go for the Green Party, but because they were put off by reformed narratives.
So interesting. 0344 499 1000. My question to you this evening on Talk is about the Green Party. I mean, maybe you're listening and watching us at the moment and you've lent your vote in the past to the Green Party. Let's get you on the air. Let's find out the thinking. What is the rationale behind your decision to support the Green Party? I personally take the view that they're nuts. I think they're a threat to our country. You know, any political party. I mean, let's just go through some of this stuff, right? Well, let's get rid of the nuclear weapons. Oh, brilliant. What are we going to do? Beat back the Russians with copies of the Green Party manifesto. It's just nuts. If we ended up with a Green government, the one thing I'd be grateful for is their view on drugs, because quite frankly, if I can get my hands on heroin and crack cocaine and the Greens are in charge, that's the only way I'm going to cope.
You can also guarantee that I won't be in the country.
No, you're going to go.
I'm going out.
I'll be stoned under a pier
literally
somewhere.
On election day, it's from the polling station straight to the airport.
So, I mean, I don't see it as a serious party, and I genuinely see it as a threat. And we also know they've got a very loose attitude towards law and order. So tell us this evening on Talk, 0344 499 1000. How concerned are you about the Green Party? You know, Peter and I are sitting here shooting the breeze. He's explained from a strategy point of view where he thinks they are now and where they're going to be heading. What matters to me, from your perspective as a voter, is, are you concerned about these guys? Do you think it's a breath of fresh air? And what do we do about it, right? Because it's very easy for Zach. I mean, he's like the Pied Piper of it, Zach Palensky, isn't
Yes,
he? He's playing his little tune and all these people follow him.
Yeah, interestingly, most voters knew of the Green Party because they had a heavy social media and online presence, more so than any other political party. When people were polled about this, they knew about Green ideas and policies from social media, not from anything else. That is it's the Mandami effect.
Couple of messages here. Johanna in Salisbury says, hello Duncan, exhausted Peter. It's all right, we'll make sure we'll fuel him with espresso as the evening continues. Polanski has, from the Palestine marches that should have been stopped, picked up a vibe, the left vibe, that is in all our establishments, from schools, universities, law enforcement, civil service, justice and labour. I think it's frightening because we are afraid to say anything because the justice has silenced us. They will destroy reform if they don't, and they will win the next election. They won't be able to do anything. Thank you, Joanna. And this is from Ian in Strathmore Valley, saying, you talked about cheese and wine earlier. Sounds like a plan. It's a good start to the weekend with you and Pete on the air. Thank you, Ian. Much appreciated. 8722, the text number. Start your message with the word talk. 0344 499 1000 for your voice notes, your calls and your WhatsApp messages. Let's talk about the wider ramifications of this result.
How long have we got?
Well, you and I have got until 9 o'clock tonight. Again, that's why I keep saying, let's just open a bottle of Malbec and crack on. There's a lot of stuff to chew over. I think the biggest winner out of all of this is Angela Rayner.
Well, this is going to be very interesting because the Labour Party is now going to tear itself apart. Do they actually try to go to the left and try to beat the Greens, or do they go to the right to try and stop reform? The Northern MPs are going to say, you've got to stop reform, because they're going to lose their voter base. That is realistically now what's going to happen. What happened to the Tories and that tearing apart is now going to happen to the Labour Party. And as I've always said, that is going to be past the popcorn moment, because you're about to see how fractured and how they go at each other much more than the Tories ever did.
Yeah, and it's going to be after the 7th of May, isn't it? That's
it's happening now.
Right.
It'll have already been happening probably when the results kind of came in last night. What I will say, the Tories are now extinct, realistically.
Yeah, let's move the conversation on a bit. So we agreed that the party is not going to lurch, it's going to go full steam ahead to the left. Rayner would presumably be the favourite candidate for a place.
I wouldn't rule out Ed Miliband if they want to kind of fight out the environmental green aspect. He's the more acceptable face of it, maybe. I don't know, but it's one of those two.
Yeah. Terrifying.
Yes.
You mentioned the Conservatives. They lost their deposit.
Yeah.
I wrote a piece a while ago for one of the national newspapers saying they should just not field a candidate, because what's the point? Where do you think this leaves the Tories?
Well, realistically, they are no longer a political force in the north of England at all. It'll be interesting to see how the southern Tories react to this, because they are two very, very different types of Tory voters. We have to remember that voter blocks aren't monoliths. They have similarities. They aren't the same. It's the same with the Muslim vote. We have to be very careful there. But I will say that the Tories can find a way back, but they need reform to continue down the kind of heavy culture war aspect, and that will only detract any kind of opportunity for the kind of soft Tory, and they'll recoup that back. What's most interesting, when you look at the data, what was once the quite a stay-at-home Tory vote went to reform. So the votes that they were relying on actually coming back to them, this has shown they haven't gone back. They've gone to reform. But that could just be the kind of emotive aspect and the kind of the dominance of the three parties.
Okay, we'll come back to the Tories in a second. Let's just take a voice note. This is Carl.
Regarding this Green victory last night, personally, I think it is a bit of a blip. It's a by-election, because there's no way in a national election, general election, people would be voting Green if they can't scrapping nuclear weapons and nuclear energy and delegalising drugs. With a by-election, you're just voting for one individual, so obviously more on local issues. So I think personally, I don't think it's anything to worry about. To be fair, I think Reform did well, getting 29% of the vote in with the demographic that you got in Gorton and Denton. Bye for now.
Carl, thank you. Thank you for your voice note. If you want to add one to our pile, 0344 499 1000. So Carl basically say, look, you know what's a by-election? Maybe we shouldn't get too animated about this.
Now, normally, I would 100% agree with that. However, this was general election turnout territory, and it had quite a lot of, obviously, national attention, and anyway, yet again, it was the local issues that played a big factor. So, yeah, you should never extrapolate out and consider it as an important, but the fundamental reality that the Labour Party is now no longer the vehicle of the left and the Tory Party are no longer the vehicle of the right cannot be underestimated. But it is up to the Green Party and Reform to move forward now and learn lessons. I think Reform seem to have learned very quickly. The Greens will have to wait and see, because I think they're just as shocked that they won. I genuinely do. When you watch every kind of Green Party person, they're like, we're not used to doing this. Like, no one's ever asked them their opinion. And I think this is going to be
they're probably still high, Peter.
Well, probably. But it's also, this could be their downfall, actually, because now people are going to pay attention to them. They're not a joke anymore. This is their first by-election win. You start winning like this, the pressure is then added to it. Reform also had the same situation but Reform have actually been able to kind of move past that initial stage. Will the Greens? Who knows? Because this kind of loose arrangement of kind of students, graduates and renters, the Muslim vote, and the kind of the soft progressive is a very loose kind of group, and there's only really, again, it's the kind of we hate that kind of arrangement. But Reform still have the kind of we hate that. They need to both pivot from hating to liking, and they've got to find a single point of like, and if they either don't do that, God knows what's going to happen.
Nigel, Zach, if you're listening and watching, you've just heard free advice there, some political strategy.
I'm not cheap either.
No, you're not cheap. You've done it on the fly. Peter Barnes, our political strategist, alongside me here on Talk on this Friday evening. We'll get to more of your messages in a few moments' time. I want to come back to the Tories and where this leaves the Conservative Party in a few moments. We'll do your messages about whether or not we are right to be concerned about the Greens. And also, we're going to focus after 8 a little bit more on the voting system, because there are allegations of cheating and a thing called family voting. Peter and I will touch on that in the next 10 minutes. But we're going to go big on it after 8, because, we know there are allegations over the years about fraud when it comes to postal voting and stuff. So I want to kick that around as well. We're getting involved. 0344 499 1000 is the number for your calls, your WhatsApps and your voice notes. I'm Duncan Barkes, and this is Talk.
every Monday to Wednesday, midnight until 1. It is Talkback.
Such a shortage of housing. You've got landlords, right, have taken that on board, and it's an absolute disgrace.
Your stories, your opinions, it is your chance to have your say. So they're literally just being rented out as hotels, basically.
Yeah, rent a load of hotels.
Well, that has really shone a light for me.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Friday evening, it's Talk. I'm Duncan Barkes at the home of common sense, and we're chewing over the election result from the Gorton and Denton by-election. The result came in at 4:30 this morning. The Green Party have yet another MP. Reform came second, Labour third. The Conservatives lost their deposit, as did the Lib Dems. Peter Barnes, political strategist, is alongside me. Let's just talk about where this leaves the Conservatives, because I think it's interesting. I'm not surprised they lost their deposit. But Kemi Badenoch issued a statement earlier on her X feed, saying the following: Labour created the monster of harvesting Muslim community bloc votes, and yesterday that monster came back to bite them. As I said many times before, we are a multiracial country, not a multicultural country. If you stir up grievance politics between groups based on religion or race, as Labour have done for decades, as Reform are seeking to do, and as the Greens have done successfully in this by-election, you are pitting neighbours against each other, and you start to unravel the culture of tolerance that makes Britain great. I'll do one more paragraph because I think we're getting the flavour. Our country is not broken, but this by-election showed that Labour, Reform and the Greens are trying very hard to break it. Labour trying to buy people off with more and more benefit spending. Reform telling people you can't be British if you aren't white. And the Greens running a nasty sectarian campaign while simultaneously wanting to legalise crack cocaine. Was this the right response from the leader of the Conservatives?
No. She's not wrong, but that was not the right response. That should have been, we've learned our lesson, we're sorry, we're going to be quiet for a bit. Okay. Realistically, that's what that should have been. Yeah. However, she's not wrong. The Labour Party have just got a taste of their own medicine. They have been running these style of campaigns for quite some time, and it actually started with Shabana Mahmood when she used to be head of campaigns for the Labour Party. Okay. She actually introduced this very heavy kind of identity politics style of campaigning, and the Green Party copied it and used it against the Labour Party very effectively. Because whilst we often say that the Gaza issue is not a British issue, if you have family in that region of the world, it's very much a personal issue. Yes. So that is why people vote on it. Yeah. You know, we can't dismiss it as much as many people have been doing. But well, I will say though that the style of the Greens campaigned on was very, very questionable. There are a lot of allegations against them. However, every party does not come out of this election smelling of roses. There's a lot of bad blood, and I will say that she's not. Kemi's response there just sounds a bit petulant child. You know, it's just like he's saying like, oh well, you know, we told you this was going to happen. Yeah. This, you know, that kind of, you know, I didn't do anything wrong kind of situation, and that's not what the Tories should have gone down the line of, because realistically, this was an extinction level event for them. Realistically, you know, there's like 2 Northern Tories left, and I'm one, and I'm not even a Tory anymore. You know, I'm not even a member of the party. That's how bad it got that I left. But the reality is, the Tories have to find a way back. That is possible, and it's through the economy, because you've got to get populist left and populist right. The middle centrist voter just wants, again, that valiance politics, that kind of do the basics right. If the Tories latch onto that, which is the major lesson from this election, they can find a way back to at least being semi-relevant. They're not going to win, of course they're not. That ship has sailed. But I will say, if the Tories don't do that in the next 4 to 5 months, find a solid narrative to stick to, they are pretty much electorally finished.
Great story in the I newspaper this evening, which feeds into what we're talking about. We're talking about the Green Party's victory and asking you the question here on Talk. Are you concerned about the Green Party, given their policies and their rhetoric? This story was written by the chief political commentator for the I, Kitty Donaldson, and they appear to have access to some video footage. And I'll just give you a sense of what this story is about. Green Party canvassers have been accused of, quote, intimidating voters after video footage showed some campaigners in Gorton and Denton encouraging them not to support Labour because it backs a genocide in Gaza. Several videos of two men with a loud hailer have been seen by the I-Paper. One clip shows one of the men claiming, vote for the Green Party, do not waste your vote on the genocide Labour Party. The only people who can defeat reform are the Green Party. Another clip, one of the men chants, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, end the occupation now, vote for the Green Party. I was watching this footage earlier. I just thought it was genuinely shocking. Are you shocked by this at all?
Sadly, no. Because unfortunately this has been part of our politics and part of the kind of public narrative for some time now. It's just not been as obvious because of, you know, there's been so much, we've had so much happening. These kind of stories they drip out the feed, but you know, these kind of very heavy, aggressive campaigning, these kind of big words like genocide and all this is becoming very common, and it actually kind of going up to people and making these comments is just become the norm, and it's going to get somebody hurt very badly. It really, really is.
It is.
Because you say that to a certain kind of voter and they're going to turn around and whack you in the face pretty hard. And unfortunately, I can see that
words have consequences.
They do. They really
particularly
do.
These kind of words.
Yes.
And you know, when the temperature is high and the environment is febrile, it is so dangerous.
And I think that's a really good point. Is actually the environment of our politics has to turn down a little bit. We are so emotive. Everything is so kind of. It's what we call this civilizational politics. In other words, you know, it's the end of Britain. This is going to destroy.
I know, Peter, but I have a great deal of sympathy because people are angry.
People are angry,
rightly so.
But you shouldn't. Political parties have to be very careful with that anger, because that is how bad people get into politics. That is how you end up with the Green Party. That is how you end up with this situation, because you feed a narrative. And if you don't agree with the ratcheted up stuff, you will look to the other side and go, well, clearly they're not that bad. They're not as bad as you think they're saying they are. And then you make them more appealing. So you, again, if you want to defeat the Greens, you don't ratchet them up as some kind of end of days thing, because you only feed their narrative that, you know, you're some kind of crank and a crazy. I think you have to be very careful how you do it, but it's very difficult. Of course it is, because I feel this the same. I do think we're 5 minutes to midnight. I actually think we're about 30 seconds to midnight. Realistic. I found the other day I was about 1 minute.
I've got some messages I want to get to, but I'm glad you said that, because sometimes people, when I say this to people, I get accused of being a little bit, you know, overreacting. But it feels to me, in my 53 years on the planet, all right, and as someone who, like yourself, has been involved in politics, writing about politics, broadcasting about politics, certainly over the last 25 to 30 years, I've never felt the way that I feel. And everything feels so tense. And it does feel, as a country, that we are in the last chance saloon.
It does. And I think it's because... somebody asked me about this at one time, and I think it's because we live very individual lives now. We aren't a country, whereas we are an island of strangers already. Even the people that, you know, that have been here a very long time or whatever, it is literally because everything is so individually personalised. We don't have a shared cultural experience anymore.
No,
and that breakdown has had huge effects, and our politics is often the main vehicle for that kind of voicing of the change. Also, the fact that the people that we used to rely on to give us the answers don't know what they're talking about anymore.
No.
And that is a big problem.
I think you're right. Let's do some of these messages. This is Steve in East Yorkshire. Evening, Steve. What we are seeing with the Green Party election result is the birth of a Muslim mainstream political party. Muslims won't be concerned by Green Party policies because over time these will be replaced with Islamic policies, with the Green Party becoming a vehicle for Muslims to advance their aims and ambitions. That's Steve in East Yorkshire. Elsewhere, this is Erios, who says, by chasing the Muslim vote, the Greens will find themselves in a cul-de-sac, being pressured into reversing their libertarian stance. And a couple more here. This is Rob. Hello, Rob. This is interesting. He talks about George Galloway, Rob. He says, if George Galloway had stood a candidate, believe me, the Greens wouldn't have won, as the Islamists would have voted for him and Reform would have won. What is enlightening is that Galloway will put lots of candidates up for May elections and general elections, which may decimate the Green votes in Muslim areas. You wait and see. Reform coming second is actually a great victory in an area of Labour for the past 100 years. Rob, thank you for that. So we know that Galloway endorsed the Green Party. We also know that, and I lose track of your party with, old Fruit and Nut, Jeremy Corbyn and...
Sarah Sultana.
Yeah. But they also endorsed the Green Party candidate, didn't they?
Yeah.
I mean, so do we think have the Greens been a bit lucky with those endorsements? And if there were to be... if there's going to be another by-election in a similar part of the country, or if we came to a general election, if we had your party candidates standing and we had George Galloway's mobs fielding candidates, that would dilute the Green Party vote.
It would.
Yeah.
However, I think the thing about that is you've now got a proof of concept that the Green Party can win. The Green Party cannot just, it's not just the Muslim vote. I was listening to Steve's comment then. It's not just the Muslim vote. They took a young vote, they took ex-pensioners, ex-Labour pensioners, they took renters, they took graduates, they took from all different bits of the country in one constituency. That is the bit that we have to focus on. The Muslim issue is significant. However, it is one of many other parts because, yes, that area has a very high percentage of Muslims demographically. However, it is the fact that they all turned out in one direction, which is more interesting. But I have to admit, there's still so much to kind of go at over all of this that I don't really want to make too many grand claims, but I do think that George Galloway stepping aside is important. Yeah. But you have to look at Muslim Voice, one of the kind of groups, did a lot of mobilisation. Those groups are going to play a big factor actually, and the tactical voting as well. You know, they had a couple of actual organisations helping people tactical vote. You know, they're advising and all that kind of thing. So our politics is moving to a kind of strategy based more than kind of ideological.
Well, I noticed in 2024, properly for the first time, the amount of tactical voting websites were in existence in a way that we hadn't really seen before, where you could type in your postcode and it's like, if you wanted to give... so I live in Chichester in West Sussex, right? In the wilds of West Sussex. Chichester's always had a Conservative MP. It was Gillian Keegan up until 2024, and she lost her job to a Lib Dem, who's called Jess Brown-Fuller. I know of people who wanted to give the Tories a bit of a bloody nose. So, they type in their postcode. It's just like, best way of defeating the Tories is Lib Dem, and they voted Lib Dem. Yeah. And we're going to see more and more of that as time goes on.
Without a doubt. But because that's the thing, it's now kind of formalised as big organisations, and also the internet has changed everything. When tactical voting was kind of first started, it was very kind of ultra kind of local. It wasn't really very well organised or anything like that. Now, there's big companies, and there's a lot of effort going into it by these kind of other parties, like the Greens, who are relying on it very heavily. But... again, you can't just kind of... if Reform or the Tories or Labour or whoever, you've got to kind of come up with a strategy to defeat it, not just keep pointing it out. Because this is all I've seen from the right today, is literally, there's this... even like Kemi's statement was exactly the same. Blaming things for the Greens winning, rather than actually understanding voters moved. Not that the voters left. You can't blame voters for going to the Green Party, because... the parties themselves forced them out. I always say that, it's Andre Walker says it as well, the Labour Party divorced their own voters. They sacked them, they got rid of them, and this is the consequence of it. The Tories did the same, and that's why you've got Reform. This is why these parties exist, because of their failures, but you can't blame them for leaving. Right. We're going to talk to someone who's going to vote Green in a few moments' time. I mean, presumably they're not on their spliff yet, so we'll get them on the air and we'll have a chin wag. Am I being unfair? I am being unfair. Have I broken the rules? I mean, I'm not suggesting that. I mean, we all know it's illegal, right? But, we have a leader of the Green Party who's well up for it all. Anyway, we're going to talk to a Green Party voter in a few moments' time. And also, I want to get into where Advance UK found themselves, Peter. Yes. I mean, Advance UK, this great force in politics led by Ben Habib and his merry men, and they all do seem to be men, managed to come behind the monster raving loony party. Yeah. Who would have thought it? This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Friday evening, this is Talk. I'm Duncan Barkes, taking care of the Friday evening show through until 9. Good to have you along. We're chewing over the Green Party by-election result in Gorton and Denton. I'm asking you, how concerned are you about the Greens? 0344 499 1000 for your calls, your voice notes and your WhatsApp messages. If you're a little bit old school and you want to text 87222, start your message with the word Talk. Alongside me is political strategist Peter Barnes. We're going to talk to a Green Party voter. Wow. I'm working on the basis that, well, Grace, let's get you on. Hello, Grace.
Hi.
I'm guessing you haven't fired up your bong yet.
I don't smoke or drink anything at all. I never have, or inject anything. I'm very boring.
Well, what's that like?
I don't agree with the Greens on drug policy. I don't agree with them on what a woman is, in that I believe passionately in science.
I don't think they know what a woman is, do they?
Well, exactly. But for me, the biggest concern is the most severe human suffering. So I know that this will sound Barbie to a lot of people listening, but I'm really angry that the Labour Party cut overseas aid, because for me, it really matters that the people who are the very most disadvantaged receive support, and I don't adhere to the idea that it all gets wasted. I know some of it's not well spent.
Well, didn't Starmer cut the overseas aid to try and put money into defence? That's why he did it.
In theory, yes, but I'm thinking, why specifically take the money from overseas aid? So some of the
because we need to defend the country.
Well, yeah, but I would take the money from somewhere else. Also, they've not actually fixed the problem of defence spending.
But Grace, I'm going to ask you, I'm going to be a little bit challenging with you, only because you and I have spoken on the radio over the last couple of decades on various radio stations. It's always a pleasure to get your thoughts and stuff. But this is part of the problem, because you said he should take the money from elsewhere. Well, where else would you take the money from? Because far too many people and politicians go, oh, yeah, but that shouldn't be cut. The money needs to come from elsewhere. We don't have the cash.
I completely see that we don't have the cash, but we don't have the cash for lots of things, and they have managed to U-turn on other policies.
Yeah, it doesn't mean they should carry on U-turning. It's like a dodgy sat-nav you bought from a market.
I guess I would probably prioritise trying to get more tax out of big corporations and the super rich. I know.
Don't you think the super rich are paying enough?
Well, evidently not, otherwise they wouldn't be super rich. We know that the gap between rich and poor has increased.
But they've all gone, Grace. Anyone who's seriously wealthy has realised Britain's not the place to be anymore. They've disappeared.
I would say that if a very wealthy person or a business has any connection to Britain, they have to be paying full tax in Britain. And if they're not doing, they shouldn't be allowed to be owning property in Britain or visiting in Britain or having business in Britain where they benefit from British taxpayers being their customers. I just think, given that actually they're making the world less safe by cutting overseas aid. One of the programmes, for instance, that they've cut, I keep bringing this up because it really sticks in my mind, one of the programmes that's been cut is the programme to tackle FGM. And I just think that's so disgusting. To obliterate efforts to help little girls in our world who are victims of FGM is so disgusting to me that I just feel I need to vote against the Labour Party.
I get that. I understand why you're making that point. Let's bring the conversation full circle a little bit. So you just, if I understood you correctly, you started off this call by saying there are certain things you don't support that the Green Party believe in, like the drugs policy and stuff, right? Yeah. But you would vote for them.
Yeah.
Why?
Well, I think we all know we're never going to have a party that we agree with on everything.
Yeah.
And I think that for me, it's partly a protest vote against the Labour Party, and I think that ultimately various things.
But Grace, with a protest vote comes responsibility. These people are proper bonkers. You realise that? They are nuts. They would leave this country defenceless. Let me lay out my stall, right? They would leave this country defenceless. Zach Polansky is on the records just going, we should give up on nuclear weapons, and I'll go and have a conversation with old Vlad in Russia going, hey, Vlad, I'll give up mine if you give up yours. I mean, the man is a moron.
I don't think they'd get that through necessarily.
But that's what they believe in. And then you've got the drugs policy stuff, and you mentioned as well they don't know what a woman is. I mean, I'm happy to talk to any Green Party activist or member who wants to come on this evening and have a chinwag about it. But to me, genuinely, I think they're a danger to this country, which is why I wanted to have the conversation, because in one element you can go, it's only a by-election, and we've had some great messages from Talk listeners and viewers just go, don't get het up about this. It's only a by-election. It's a protest vote. And you yourself mentioned it's a protest vote against Labour, right? That's what you said. But if more and more people follow your line of thinking, then it stops being a protest vote and it becomes actually something quite concerning.
I guess what I'm really hoping is that the Labour Party will see that people are voting Green and they will take notice and listen to some of the concerns of people like myself. I guess that's what I'm ultimately hoping. I don't kind of think of my vote as being capable of making any particular change. And I really like our local Labour MP. But, I mean, you talk about things being dangerous. I'm kind of feeling like there are dangers on all sides. I'm thinking that I'm seeing, indeed, that you're completely right that there are some very dangerous people who support the Green Party, but there are also some very dangerous people on the other side of politics who are espousing some really unpleasant rhetoric that I'm sure you wouldn't agree with.
Well, that's the point that Peter here was making earlier. All right, so very quickly, if I've understood your call correctly, and again, it's always a pleasure to get your views on the air, you would vote Green ultimately to punish the Labour Party or to try and get the Labour Party to focus more on the things that matter to you. So essentially, it's a punishment vote.
It's a vote to send a message that the Labour Party needs to stop trying to just appease people who aren't going to vote for them anyway, and to care about the human beings in our world, not only about the interests of certain donors that they might have or things like that. I mean, it's been weird seeing the Labour Party recently say often they have a moral mission. They keep using this phrase, and I'm thinking, OK, but what are your morals? And I think a lot of people are asking that right now across the political spectrum. OK, Grace, great call. Pleasure to talk to you. Thank you. That's Grace in London. Yeah. Saeed is in London as well and is a Green Party supporter. Good evening. Wow.
Yes, hi there. Yes, I have just finished celebrating our magnificent victory in Gorton and Denton, and I think that shows that there is a possibility of offering an alternative to the sort of to the centrism of Starmer and to the rather sort of divisive rhetoric coming out of Reform. Okay, excellent. Before you continue any further, I'm fascinated to find out, how have you been celebrating? Have you had jelly and ice cream? You got some cake on the go? You've got some balloons and streamers? I mean, what's your definition of celebration? Oh, we were. I was at a Green Party sort of event while we waited for the results to come out. We stayed there till whatever 6 in the morning, till when our candidate came, and we welcomed her, and then we went home. So it was like, I don't think it was a particularly unusual election night celebration from any other party. Okay, that might disappoint you. No, I'm not disappointed. I'm fascinated. I was just curious to know how you might have been celebrating the by-election victory. So, are you a Green Party member? Yes, I am. Yes. You are. So, and can I ask, for how long have you been a member for? I was a Labour Party member. I got very disappointed by the direction that Starmer was taking the party in, and I found a new home for myself in the Greens, and it also aligned with my sort of increasing concern about the climate and how the world and weather patterns are changing as we speak. Well, you see, you talk about the climate, right? I saw an interview earlier today with Zach Polanski, your party leader, who only used the term environment once. The Green Party, in my interpretation, has moved away from caring about the environment or climate change or whatever, and is a very different part. It doesn't seem to care one iota about the environment anymore. It's all about religion. It's all about freeing up drugs. It's all about handing over nuclear weapons. No. I think you're presenting a very strange stereotype, and that's not why people. Why is it a stereotype? Because you're projecting your own sort of views on what the Green Party should be. Hear me out. Listen, mate. I'm not projecting anything. The policies that I've listed are Green Party policies. I'm not making this stuff up. Your leader
doesn't want Britain to have nuclear weapons. Your leader wants people to freely get their hands on crack cocaine and heroin. I'm not making this stuff up. He has actually said it. It's on the record.
No, you are making it up. Let me explain. So first of all, we and all humans should want to live in a nuclear-free world where we don't have the threat of nuclear Armageddon hanging over our heads 24/7 as it used to.
How are we going to defend ourselves?
Right. Yeah. No,
hang on. Let's pick up on this point. How are we going to defend ourselves? Are we going to start beating back invading forces with rolled-up copies of The Guardian or the Green Party manifesto, or, our used tobacco pouches from the last spliff we've had? How are we going to do it?
No. Look, we are not defenseless victims as you represent us. We have gone around invading other countries 10 times more than they've ever invaded us. So let's.
But that's irrelevant.
Pretending.
It's about defending this country in the future.
Why is it irrelevant?
Because I've just told you, it's about defending this country in the future. But listen, I'm concerned because everything I've listed, and I'm grateful for the call, and it's good of you to phone up because I did ask for people who are Greens members or supporters. But I mean, you're telling me that I've made stuff up. I've just quoted back to you actual Green Party policies from the mouth of the Green Party leader. Surely you must be aware that's what he believes in. Yeah.
So Zach believes in living in a nuclear-free world where we go for nuclear disarmament.
Right.
It's not a unilateral disarmament. It's a multilateral disarmament, and so that we get rid of the scourge of nuclear weapons.
So you and I can agree that he has said we should get rid of nuclear weapons. Agreed?
Yes.
But then I've not made it up, have I? You've just agreed with me.
No. But you're presenting it as some sort of a unilateral disarmament, and I'm saying it's a multilateral disarmament.
Well, I'm presenting it as something that's massively naive.
What is that? Well, this is a long-term or an objective that we, as citizens of this world, should have. Now, we are not asking to unilaterally give up our nuclear weapons because that would be, from a negotiating perspective, not very clever. Now, moving on to your drug policy.
All right, very, very quickly, because I've only got about 60 seconds left, but I want to hear your point. So the drug policy, what's your interpretation?
Again, we want to adopt a healthcare-based approach towards the drug problem. We have seen war on drugs, which has failed miserably for decades. We have one of the highest death rates and drug-related deaths in Europe. It is not working. We want
because it's not being properly enforced. People walk down the street now with a spliff in their hands, and the police don't bat an eyelid.
Right-wingers like you think that it's just you throw some more.
That's rather presumptuous. You think I'm a right-winger?
Yeah, of course. I've listened to your program before. Yeah. So that is our policy. So please
I think I've been called bang to rights there.
Yeah.
All right. Listen, Saeed, it's been good of you to call up. I'm going to move it on only for the time restrictions that exist. But that's Saeed in London, another Green Party voter and supporter.
Two very different types of voter, Grace and Saeed there. Yeah. And yet, as I said, the Green Party have captured both of them.
Yeah.
And Grace's point about the moral authority of the Labour Party, it cannot be understated because she's perfectly right. You can't go around and say we're on a moral mission and ignore something that the vast majority of their voter base cares about. Right. It's a big point there.
All right, brilliant. Peter, more from you in a few moments' time. I'll come back. I don't know where this hour's gone. We'll come back and do a final 10 minutes about some of the political stories of the day in a few moments' time. It's Friday evening. This is Talk.
every Monday to Wednesday, midnight until 1. It is Talkback.
Such a shortage of housing. You've got landlords, right, have taken that on board, and it's an absolute disgrace.
Your stories, your opinions, it is your chance to have your say. So they're literally just being rented out as hotels, basically.
Yeah, rent a load of hotels.
Well, that has really shone a light for me.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Friday evening, I'm Duncan Barkes. This is Talk, the home of common sense. I'm here through until 9. Alongside me is Peter Barnes, political strategist. We're chewing over the results of the by-election, the Gorton and Denton by-election, talking about the Green Party, but also some other stuff around the by-election results. Before Peter and I just chew over some of the other fascinating facts off the back of the results, let's get a voice note. This is Ian.
Hi, Duncan. Hi, Peter. Ian from Oldham. I fear with the Greens we are going down the Iran route, to be honest. And at 68, for the first time in my life, I've started thinking I'm glad I'm at this end of life and not near the beginning. I'd advise anybody to get out of this country if they possibly could. Cheers.
See, that is so depressing, but it does feed into this thing we were talking about earlier, this almost like 5 minutes to midnight. That's what it feels like.
It really does. It's interesting because he comes from Oldham, which is, again, a very heavy Muslim area. The north of England is going to be fascinating, and it's going to hold so much power because it's much more diverse than the south. Yeah. So the kind of individual constituency makeup, the Red Wall, I don't think it's as secure as people think it is now, because this shows that, again, with the loose coalitions and these arrangements of different voters, there's a very serious threat to reform here if they are not careful. And candidate selection and message discipline is the future for reform.
Well, let's hope they can manage to do it, because previous examples of Nigel's party, UKIP, and the Brexit Party, message discipline has not necessarily been their strongest area.
It's definitely not at the moment for reform. But
let's just talk about some of the other results that we got to hear about at 4:30 this morning. I was genuinely fascinated, and it's very difficult. It's very easy sometimes to get caught up with the world of your social media on your phone. All right. So if you're someone who's on X or Facebook or whatever, and you're interested in politics, the algorithm will feed you a load of stuff about the world of politics. And we have seen in the last 2 months is it the right splitting? I suppose you could argue it is. So, we have Rupert Lowe, who set up this movement called Restore Britain, which always sounds like a furniture company to me. He set it up as a movement, and then he announced a few weeks ago it's now a political party. Yep. We then had, of course, Rupert Lowe used to be a Reform MP, and he's now an independent MP. And we also got Ben Habib, who, remind me, was he vice chair of Reform? He was vice chair of Reform. He fell out with Big Nige, and he went away and he set up Advance UK, which always sounds like a toothpaste to me. So Advance UK stood a candidate in the by-election, and they came behind the monster raving loony party. And this is a classic example of people, if you follow social media, if you follow X, you'd think Advance UK is this going to be the coming force on the right of the political spectrum. Yet in this by-election, they lost out to a bloke who came dressed as a pig.
Yes. So they got 154 votes, which is 0.4%. You needed 1,839 votes to keep your deposit, which is about 500 quid. They didn't lay a finger on reform. No. Not even a finger. Even if everything had gone, they wouldn't have made an ounce of difference. It's because of what we call protest oxygen. Yeah. Reform sucked it all up. There is no actual viable space for a kind of insurgent force to take down reform. If Advance want to move forward, they have to move as a single unit as Restore and Advance. It's the only way they can do it, because what they're going to do and what they need is credibility. They don't have it at the moment, I'm sorry to say. And I'm not necessarily, everybody knows I'm not pro-reform, I'm certainly not pro-Restore either, but I will say that it's this oxygen space that they need to kind of, they've got till May the 7th, basically. If they're not in line, then it's nothing more than a hobby, I'm afraid, realistically, because it's about viability.
Is it? Is it a rich man's hobby?
If they don't get together by the May the 7th, I'm sorry, it's not there. But again, nationally, you have to look at some of the polling with a heavy dose of salt that they might have 7%. That's not something to be sniffed at. But I will say, this doesn't look good for them. I did say they should not have fielded a candidate, because this is what was going to happen. Because what they've just done is they've made themselves less credible. Because, again, the Reform Party gets to say, you didn't even beat the monster raving loony party. That is more powerful, because what it actually means is that soft Reform voters, who might quite like Ben Habib, not quite on board with Nigel, are not going to move. Because what's the point?
They've demonstrated failure.
They've demonstrated failure.
Right, let's take a voice note. This is Martin.
Good God, can you imagine if the Greens got in? The mess we would be in. Look at the mess Labour have made. And the Greens are way, way, way worse than them. Good God. I'm just dumbfounded, absolutely dumbfounded that anybody would be dumb enough to vote for him. But there we go. Takes all sorts.
It does take all sorts. A lot of despair knocking around this evening.
Reform should actually welcome this result.
Go on.
Because now you've got proof of concept. You have a threat. You've actually now got a reason to vote for Reform, because I've always said for the last couple of months, Reform have been some kind of rather resting on the laurels a little bit.
Can I just say, one of my favourite sports is having a glass of wine in the evening and looking at your latest ex-posting about Reform UK and then reading the replies.
Yes,
it's better than anything on the telly.
To admit, yes, because this is the point. Reform actually now have a kind of, for too long they were falling under foregone conclusion. In other words, Reform is going to become the government. Of course they are. Of course they are. This shows not a foregone conclusion. They now have to seriously kind of level up, and their voters have to turn out to vote. They had a very good ground game, better than most of us expected, but nowhere near to what the Greens were able to mobilise. That was a big factor in this, actually getting people out to vote. The Reform did very well. However, Reform also have to cut out some of the shenanigans, they ended up in the High Court over this election. Let's be real. There's a big problem there. They had a problem of an anti-Semitic comment and the suspension of a campaigner person. When you talk about professionalising, this was not a professional campaign. You want to do this on a general election level at this stakes, get better, and get better yesterday.
All right. We'll continue to take your calls about the Green Party and whether or not we should be concerned about them, but also in the next hour we're going to broaden out the chat just a little bit and talk about where we are regarding our electoral and voting system. We know there's been allegations of cheating. We know there's been allegations of family voting. I want you to tell me after 8 o'clock, 0344 499 1000, do you trust our electoral voting system? Do you think it's robust enough? Is it fair? Or is it too open to fraud? That conversation and more after 8 o'clock here at Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Friday evening, this is Duncan Barkes. It is Talk, the home of common sense. I said about an hour ago when we started this show that this is the kind of perfect show you want to be listening to, watching, maybe even taking part in when you have a glass of wine on the go. And that really was a hint. That was a hint that maybe someone might have found a bottle of Malbec or Rioja somewhere, and we could have cracked open the bottle, had a couple of glasses, and continued to shoot the breeze about where we find ourselves politically off the back of the Gorton and Denton by-election. Pete Barnes is alongside me. We are talking about the by-election result. It gets us into so many different areas. We spent the last hour talking about the Green Party and whether or not we should be concerned about their victory and some of their policies. Happy to continue to take some of your messages and calls on that. But also I want to focus on something else that's happened off the back of this. And this is the concerns about, well, some people use the term cheating or the term family voting. We know that Reform UK's leader, Nigel Farage, has reported allegations of family voting at the Gorton and Denton by-election to Greater Manchester Police and the Electoral Commission. He's urging an investigation into reports by independent election observers of extremely high levels of family voting. So let's have some context behind this. It isn't just Reform going, oh, this is what we believe. There were independent observers at polling stations who fed this stuff back. So it's important that that point is made. And just for clarity, family voting is where a family member is seen to be influencing somebody else's vote, for example, by entering the polling booth with them, right? So it's against law. You can't do that. You're not supposed to do that in this country. There are allegations here by this organisation, Democracy Volunteers. Farage has said it's got to be investigated. And it got us thinking here at Talk on this Friday evening about our electoral voting system, because it's not the first time we've had concerns about voting in this country. You don't have to go too far back about concerns regarding postal votes in Tower Hamlets in London. You know, people do have concerns about it. So one of the things I want to kick around over the next hour, alongside the Green Party conversation, is I want you to tell us, do you trust our electoral voting system? I mean, I take the view that postal voting, it's far too easy to get a postal vote. And I think, and I was chatting to Gabby, who's producing tonight, earlier, I think unless you're in the armed forces serving overseas or genuinely unable to get to a polling station for disability reasons, I don't think you should have a postal vote. And my rationale for that is quite simply this. There are people in dungeons around the world, right, have been campaigning for democracy in their country for years. People have lost their lives because they dared to protest for wanting democracy. Democracy is something that should be cherished and not abused. And do you know what? If you can't be bothered to walk to your polling station that's 5 minutes away, then actually you're not really respecting democracy. So that's my start of a 10. But we're going to talk to Joe Twyman in a second, founder of Delta Poll, and get his take on this. But first, Peter, this idea that there's been cheating or family voting, particularly in this by-election, what's your take?
Yes. So what's been important is that Democracy Volunteers actually said this on the night. That is a very, very important, because normally these end up being a report that sits on a shelf that only people like me read. So the fact they said it on the night, I think, shouldn't be underestimated. However, when you actually break it down at the numbers, this didn't really make a major impact in the result. Right. So you can't really say that, oh, this is why they won. I don't think you can really make that claim. But again, the Ballot Secrecy Act, again, it obviously it is law, and you could just being present is going to people argue can be make a person vote a certain way. I don't want us to go down the line of having police officers in polling stations. Right. I think because this is going to become a big culture war flashpoint, we have to be very careful.
Why would it be a flashpoint, do you think? If that's the law of the land, then people need to respect it.
Because I think the presence of the police, which is the representation of the state in a polling station, I think is a bad symbol. It really fundamentally changes how our politics actually runs and feels, and it becomes a lot more kind of a little bit more kind of, well, they're watching you. Can you really then trust the police?
I get that, and I think that's a concern I understand. But I mean, if there is family voting going on or some form of cheating, then what do you do about it?
I think you actually have to beef up the positions and the responsibilities of people who are running the polling stations. The fact that nobody came out and said anything was going on. I mean, Manchester City Council basically denied everything pretty much off the bat, which I thought was a very odd thing to do, considering, you know, this group is not a group of cranks. They're academics. They come from a proper organisation. And the fact that they said it, like I say, on the night is the important part. But yeah, I've always had these concerns about our voting system. It is not secure as much as people think it is. The idea that we have digital voting is laughable to me. I mean, but yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how we move forward on this. Farage jumped on it straight away, rightly or wrongly, I don't know. I think it does look a bit kind of, no, see, this is why we lost kind of thing. But, you know, getting your excuses out early. But yeah, this is a concern because postal voting, right in line with you, shouldn't exist unless you physically cannot get there. I don't understand why it's a thing. It is literally, you know, you're asking for trouble with it.
I think
that's my always point on that.
Let's bring in Joe Twyman, who's founder of Delta Poll. Joe, welcome to Talk.
Good evening.
Thank you for your time on this Friday evening. I suspect you'd rather be, you know, with a takeaway and a glass of wine or maybe down the pub, so I appreciate your time. Before we get into the reads, if you like, of these allegations of family voting and cheating and whether or not there are better ways to improve our voting system here in the United Kingdom, just be kind enough to give us your thoughts about the by-election results, because, you know, you, like us, will have looked at the results and maybe got some takeaways. What are your headlines?
Well, I think the major takeaway is the collapse of the two-party system, at least in this by-election. By-elections are unusual and they have unique circumstances that make it very difficult to extrapolate up to the national picture, but they demonstrate the potential that parties have. And I think the potential demonstrated in this election was enormous for both Reform and the Greens. Labour, the Conservatives and the Lib Dems, the three parties that have been in government essentially in our lifetimes, all our lifetimes, they managed a combined total of 29%. That is a tiny amount. And yes, that part of that is demonstrated through the collapse of Labour. More than half of their, exactly in fact, half of their vote share was lost in 18 months. But nonetheless, it demonstrates just how much of an appetite there is for anti-establishment challenger parties, whether it's on the progressive left with the Greens or whether it's on the conservative right with Reform.
So you take the view this is not an outlier. Is this genuinely a radical change to where we're heading politically in this country in terms of the old system that we've always known is now dumped?
Well, if the last 10 to 15 years of British politics have taught us anything, it's that nothing can be guaranteed and nothing can be taken for granted. I think it's too early to know whether this is a turning point or just a talking point. But as I say, what it demonstrates is it could be the kind of change that you're talking about. If, and it is a big if, Reform and Greens are able to pick up the kind of constituencies that the Greens won last night, it could bring about an enormous change. But doing something at by-elections is one thing, translating that to national elections and general elections is another thing entirely. And there are 3 years until we have to have a general election. It's not much more than 3 years ago that Boris Johnson was talking about his plans for a third term in government.
It's true.
So it's a long time in politics.
Political strategist Peter Barnes is alongside me in the studio, Joe. And I mean, you know, you said that earlier. You know, the results from Gorton and Denton is kind of it's a very clear message to I suppose the political establishment.
Yeah, I completely agree with what Joe's just said there. You know, you have to be very careful about making the grandiose claims, but you can't deny these numbers when you look at the fact that the three main parties that have dominated our lives have literally had their butts handed to them by a very angry electorate. And I think that's a real, when you listen to why people voted and why people have moved away, it is because they feel that nothing has changed. This is a literal kind of, we're giving you a lesson, we're going to teach you a lesson. I think that's a really big point. But yeah, the grand narratives and stuff, you have to be careful, but I have to admit that this is just a kind of one of those nights where we will remember this by-election as maybe the big turning point in British politics.
Joe, it must make, with the greatest of respect, it must make your job even more challenging now with this change of our political system, you know, with 5 or potentially 7 parties all out there with their various messages, all going after different segments of the community. How do you poll for that kind of thing?
It is difficult. When it comes to individual constituencies, it's virtually impossible to do accurate polling on those now because it's so expensive to actually send people out and interviewing people. Instead, we tend to model individual constituencies, but individual models can't take account of factors within individual constituencies. And that gets really complicated when you're talking about potentially a 5 or 6 horse race. And that means that a party could win on 20-25% of the vote, and every little vote counts. And so add those up and you have a great deal of complexity. And of course, it's not the vote share that decides the election. It is the number of seats won and lost. And so, yeah, it's pretty complicated.
Final question about the by-election results before we get into these allegations of family voting and cheating that I'm keen to get your view on. I mean, who do you think, out of the result that was declared at 4:30 this morning, which political party has come out of this the best?
Oh goodness! I think it's definitely the Greens. The first time in their history they've won a by-election. This was not in their top 100 target seats, so it's not even particularly demographically orientated towards them. But nonetheless, they were able to avoid a split of the progressive vote and come through to win. So definitely a replication of the kind of growth in their popularity that we've seen since Zach Polanski became leader. They've managed to translate those numbers in the polls to votes in the ballot box.
And what lessons do you think Reform will have taken away from the result?
I think Reform will be perhaps comfortable, though not overexcited about their performance. I imagine, even though they now say they never expected to win, I imagine that they would have hoped to be able to perhaps sneak it. As I say, if Labour and the Greens had divided the vote on that side of the political spectrum, maybe they will think about the importance of a local candidate in future. There was a lot of controversy about whether their candidate was actually from Manchester or really from St Albans.
Well, he delivered pizzas there for a bit, didn't he? I think Matthew Goodwin. That was the.
No, but I have to say that Joe's perfectly right here. I think the candidate selection for Reform and all political parties is going to play a big factor. That kind of authenticity, that being from the area, I think is going to be a bigger factor now than it ever has been. You know, it's always a bit of a kind of cliche, you've got to have a local candidate. I think this has proven to a degree you've got to have at least a stronger local candidate than there's the questions of St Albans and Manchester.
Joe, one of the things we're asking our talk viewers and listeners this evening is about their concerns or whether or not they trust our electoral system, our voting system, chiefly off the back of these allegations of family voting. Also this organisation, Democracy Volunteers, who say they observed extremely high levels of family voting. We know Nigel Farage has said this should be investigated. What's your take on this? Because Peter was making the point earlier that actually these concerns were actually raised last night. So, I mean, is this something you think is widespread and people are only actually picking up on it?
I don't know much about the specific details of electoral fraud in elections generally, other than the fact that it is at a very low level nationally. But similarly, there have been reports, not just in this by-election but at previous elections, of shall we say discrepancies in certain constituencies across the country. I don't think that it's a widespread issue. I also don't think that it has an impact on the overall result. But our democratic system needs the trust of the people in order to function. That is very important. And so, if an investigation does or does not take place, it must be seen to be transparent and truthful and open with its findings, so that people can have that trust in the system. We have had changes in recent years, the introduction of photo ID, for instance.
Yes.
We're going to have further changes, 16, 17-year-olds entering the electorate. All of this needs to be done with the consent of the people in order to maintain that trust.
And what's your overall sense of the British public and whether or not they have faith within our current system? Because, of course, we were talking earlier that, I remember very clearly the concerns about voter fraud regarding postal votes in Tower Hamlets in London. It was a very big story about whether or not the results were, to coin a phrase, pucker. In your view, do you think the majority of people in this country think our voting system is pretty solid, pretty secure, pretty sound?
From all the data that I've seen, a strong majority of people do believe that overall the health of the democratic system in this country is good, that it can be trusted, and the results are verifiable and accurate. But as I say, I think there is an issue in certain areas. But the issue of but it is all very complicated, because changes to the system, for instance, such as the introduction to voter ID, which was presented as an opportunity to make the process more secure, do have impacts, and people indeed have been turned away from polling stations because they don't remember their ID. That has been found to disproportionately impact older voters, and so it's nothing is achieved without cost. Postal votes, for instance, are there because the intention is to boost turnout. Because in the 1990s and early 2000s there was a big drop in turnout. As someone who has got a postal vote in every single election, I think, since the mid-2000s, I would be very disappointed if they were removed, because I work extremely hard on election day, as I'm sure you can imagine. So it is a complicated picture. No approach is absolutely perfect. We've seen in America the issues around digital voting, but what is important is that the general public, the ordinary people on the street, the British people, trust that the electoral process is working as it should. And I'm pleased to say that, at least so far, that is overwhelmingly the belief.
Joe, pleasure to talk to you. Thanks for your time on this Friday evening. Joe Twyman, founder of Delta Poll, here on Talk. Well, let's put that to the test with you, watching and listening to Talk on this Friday evening. Voter trust in our electoral system. Joe there saying it's pretty good, right? You know, most people in this country are like, yeah, it kind of works. I mean, it could be improved, but actually you have faith in it. Do you have faith in our voting system in the United Kingdom? This comes about regarding allegations of family voting, or indeed cheating, as some people have said. 0344 499 1000. And give me a view on postal votes. I find myself being quite a hard line on this. I think unless you're serving overseas in our armed forces, or genuinely cannot get to a polling station because of a disability or whatever, then you shouldn't have a postal vote. It really is that simple. I'm sympathetic to what Joe said. He works on election day. I kind of get that. But when we know there have been cases of serious question marks over postal voting in places like Tower Hamlets, is that an issue? But I want to get a sense. I mean, what have you seen? What have you heard when you've ever been to a polling station? Do you find yourself thinking something a bit dodgy going on here? You need to be our eyes and ears. 0344 499 1000. And I'm interested in a couple of things. So Joe was saying a few moments ago there, Peter, that there are certain communities where family voting might be more prevalent than other communities, you know, and he was being quite gentle. But we're talking about Muslim communities where, you know, a man, I mean, Sky News couldn't believe there was their reporter Sam Coates who was, you know, feeding back that he was knocking on doors in Gorton, and women were answering the door just going, you need to talk to my husband about voting and stuff like that. And he was like, oh, this is outrageous. And it's like, well, is it really? Are you surprised by this?
It's rather laughable, really, how little they actually know of the real world. But it is interesting, actually. I watched Samara Gill. She was up there, and it was pretty much the exact same thing when she was asking people out about. There were some people that didn't speak English. There was some people that you know, you got to ask this person who just didn't want to talk to about the political stuff. But again, this really shows about integration. It shows that we are a nation, not one. We are multiple different nations existing next to each other, and this is a huge, huge problem. But I do agree, and I wrote it down, it's the major word, trust. Trust. That is the central issue on the ballot paper every single time. It's do you trust the way when you put the X in the box, you know, the system is fair. People feel at the moment there's not a lot of fairness in this country, and I think this is a big, big problem, because Nigel Farage will no doubt ramp this up, and it's naturally going to be a big issue. But I will say, I agree with Joe that people generally do trust it, so they've got to play it very carefully, this, because it will look like you're targeting a community if you don't have the evidence to back it up. So we've got to wait for the police investigation, because I know they're looking into this report, and we'll see where we come from with that. But again, it's very unlikely that this made an impact on any result. But if it starts to become more prevalent because of people want to stop reform, that is a big problem. That is how far are they willing to go to stop reform. Okay. 2 questions for you this evening on Talk. 0344 499 1000. Talking about our voting system, our electoral system. Do you think it works? Do you think it's safe? Do you think it's secure? Do you think it's open to fraud? Give me your calls, your WhatsApp messages and your voice notes. We'll play them out. And also, we're talking about the victors of the by-election, the Green Party, given some of their policies and how they campaigned. How concerned are you about the Green Party? 0344 499 1000 is the number. This is Talk.
every Monday to Wednesday, midnight until 1, it is Talkback.
Such a shortage of housing. You've got landlords, right, are taking that on board, and it's an absolute disgrace.
Your stories, your opinions, it is your chance to have your say. So they're literally just being rented out as hotels, basically.
Yeah, rent it out as hotels.
Well, that has really shone a light for me.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Friday evening, this is Talk, the home of common sense. I'm Duncan Barkes, taking care of business through until 9. Peter Barnes, political strategist, is alongside me. In around 10 minutes' time, we're going to chew over these figures that have come out, which I genuinely find staggering. Almost 1 million young people, we're talking 16 to 24-year-olds in the UK, are not working, not studying, not doing any apprenticeships. Almost 1 million. The number keeps going up. Why? And the bigger question is, what are these people doing? I just don't know what they do. I mean, what are they doing? Unless they're Green Party supporters sitting in their room puffing away on something. I don't know what they're doing. So we're going to get into this in around 10 minutes' time. Genuinely, I want you to tell me what you've experienced and what you know about this. Because it appears to me increasingly there's this lost generation that's coming through. Almost 1 million 16 to 24-year-olds. They call them NEETs, right? Not in employment, education or training. Right? Why does this figure keep going up? And more importantly, what are they doing? We'll do that later. In the meantime, much to go through regarding the Green Party and also the voting system and voting in general here in the UK. Here's a voice note from Debbie.
It's Debbie from Cornwall. I really resonate with your caller earlier on about leaving the country if you're at the other end of his age. I mean, I'm 64 and I mean, I'm going to be, be hopeful, but we've got 3 years, still 3 more years of this, and it's extremely scary. I mean, I'm already scared to death what's already happened, but I do worry about how things will change in the next 3 years and the next election. I'm going to vote Reform. I think that's our best chance for true, real British people, but just as a however, if Reform or right wing did not get in the next general election, I would be selling my property and moving abroad. I don't know where because Europe is as bad, but I seriously, hand on my heart, I could not bear it. I really couldn't bear it, and I would hope that my family would follow me. Anyway, sorry it's not very cheery, but that's how I'm really feeling. And I think a lot of other British people are feeling like that. Isn't it a shame that I've got to leave my own country because my government has let me down?
The sense of despair is so loud, isn't it? And again, it comes back to that thing, Peter, you and I have mentioned a few times since 7 o'clock, that almost it feels like 5 minutes to midnight.
Right, it does. And I think a lot of people think it's completely gone midnight.
Where is the hope, do you think? Is there any hope? Is it Nigel Farage?
Point. Just in general, where is the hope? Everybody is running negative campaigns.
Right.
Every single party is, that is terrible, this is awful. To really rally this nation, you need a vision of what you're going to turn it into. We all know it's terrible. Every political party, this is the challenge for every single one of them. Give me something to hope for.
Right.
And I think you give the people that, you will wipe the floor with everybody else in the next general election, because it feels like this, feels a sense of despair, feels this kind of 5 minutes to midnight vibe, and nobody's offering that bit of salvation. Even Reform he's our only hope. He's still framed in a negative perspective.
Well, let me challenge that a bit. I mean, I'm not in the market for going into bat for Sir Keir Starmer, but I mean, is he not trying to say, look, we're doing this, we're going to improve the economy, da 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 da? Isn't he trying to put forward a a positive message? Is it not Kemi trying to put forward a positive message by saying that Britain is not broken? I mean, that's positive, isn't it?
Yes. So the Britain is not broken thing is actually quite an interesting point, because it's come up on the doorstep actually quite a bit in terms of, well, people don't want to say the country is broken because then it feels like even more defeated. So actually, it's not worked out for Reform going down this line as well as they would hope.
Okay.
Because the Tories can never admit to breaking the country because they're the ones that broke it. Right. The Labour Party is an interesting one, really, because in theory, you're right. However, words don't meet action.
No.
So they're giving a positive message, delivering terribleness. So I think that's the big problem they've got, is the words don't connect. So that just feels like they're disingenuous.
And I don't think there's any real conviction behind them, and that's probably down to Keir Starmer's inability to be an effective communicator. Because I mean, he'll just blurt out breakfast clubs.
Yeah.
And it's just like, right.
Yeah.
You know. And
I love the idea that the breakfast clubs are all we need.
Let's take a call. This is Michael in Belfast. Michael, welcome to Talk.
Oh, hi, Duncan. How you doing?
Yeah, very good, sir. What have you got for us?
Duncan, this Green Lark, they better enjoy their 15 minutes of fame. They've been hijacked by the Islamists, as Galloway was as well. And when the Islamists, they're going to decay quicker than their leaders' teeth. When the Islamists don't need them, they'll be thrown to the wolves and never to be seen again. The problem for me, my big worry, Duncan, is this is going to make... Now, the Islamists are already dictating what Labour does, what the government does. The two-child thing that they said they'd never change, they've changed. That's because of the Islamist pressure. Gaza, recognising Palestinian state, is because of the Islamists. The Islamists already running Labour. It's going to make them run the Labour Party and the government even more. And my question for you, Duncan, is why don't the Muslims and Islamists have their own party? They will have eventually, of course they will.
Well, you could argue there are the green shoots of that, because in the last election we had a number of independent, they call them independent Gaza MPs, don't they? And you could also argue, Michael,
that they don't even say Gaza.
You could also argue, Michael, hang on a second, mate. I was also going to make the point that you've got Jeremy Corbyn and Zara Sultan as your party that might be quite sympathetic as well. So you could argue that there is a depository for that kind of mindset.
No, but they haven't.
Their own specific point. I know what you're saying, actually. It's very interesting, because they tried this at the last general election and they got knocked back by the Electoral Commission because they hadn't qualified to become a political party. But it is interesting. If the Green parties do get destroyed by the new Muslim vote, I don't know when that's going to happen. And this is the big problem. It's the reactions of other parties to this election that will dictate the future of everything. Because if the Reform Party move more to the centre to try and capture more of the minority vote, which they're going to have to do, will that then lead to more offshoots to the right? Where do the Labour Party go? Do they go more left or do they go more right? How they react to the Greens is the bigger story, I think, in terms of planning out for the future.
And particularly in those northern areas as well, where there is an above average Muslim population, some of those northern former mill towns and stuff. If you're a political party who wants to win, I mean, you're going to have to show a bit of leg to that cohort, aren't you?
Yeah, you definitely, particularly the Labour Party, if they want to kind of stay relevant. The Tories are, like I said, I think they're electorally dead in the north, but in the south, how are they going to play a factor? What about the Lib Dems? I mean, where are the Lib Dems? They've got pretty much annihilated at this one, but the original protest party of this nation isn't even a feature anymore. That's huge, realistically, because will Ed Davies survive? I think he's next on the chopping block.
Well, he ought to be.
Well,
he's like the Benny Hill of politics.
Well, you've got to try and find him first. He's doing Takeshi's Castle everywhere. He could go, but maybe that's his trick. If he just keeps moving, they can't stop him. But I mean, his future now rests very squarely on the chopping block, because these results are a catastrophe. They're not in the national conversation, and that is a big problem. Where that kind of protest vote would normally go, they're now going to the Greens, and that is a bigger problem.
I've got some messages. I'm really sorry. I've been a bit tardy with reading out the messages. So if you have taken the time and trouble to WhatsApp in or text in, forgive me. See, I'm happy to apologise if I get things wrong. So I'm going to do some of these messages. Ian from Walsall says lots of lovely things. So good to know you're enjoying it, Ian. Here's a question for you, Peter. You might be able to answer this. My question is, I believe Dave, so that's Zach, right? Yep. Follow everyone. Zach Polanski is Dave. isn't an MP. So what happens if, God forbid, the Greens win the election? Would he be Prime Minister without being an MP?
Right. Okay, so you have to remember that you become Prime Minister not because you win a general election. You are given the confidence of the House of Commons, and that basically means you lead the largest group, because political parties are irrelevant realistically to the parliamentary system. So what they would do is he could still be the leader of the Green Party, but he would not be the Prime Minister, because the Prime Minister has the confidence of the Commons, and you have to be a member.
Right.
So that's how that would work.
So basically what he needs to do is become an MP at some point, and what he should probably do is boot out Sean Berry in Brighton and Hove, which is probably a very safe Green seat, and stand there.
Pretty much. Bristol West might be a good one for
Bristol.
But what would be interesting is I kind of miss Caroline Lucas. And I miss Caroline.
I never thought I would say that.
Same here.
So for those who don't know, Caroline Lucas, she was leader of the Green Party on a couple of different terms, but also was their first Green MP in Brighton and Hove. And she, I mean, I remember covering the story. When in Brighton Pavilion, wasn't it? I remember covering the story when, you know, she was at a protest, it was fracking or something like that, and she got arrested and the police carried her away, and it's like Caroline standing up for the planet. That's when the Green Party was the Green Party,
and, you know,
not the grotesque party.
The caller earlier was perfectly right. They don't do green issues. They don't do it. They've used it as a vehicle in, and they've been able to make it about class war whilst still having a hint of green to attract the voters. It's a genius strategy, but it's terrifying.
Right. More of your messages coming up. I will do more of them before I go home at 9 o'clock, because I'm aware I have been a little bit shabby on this, so forgive me. So John, who's in Angus, and also Elaine, who's in Scotland, and Catherine in Cardiff. I will get to your messages, I promise. But we need to get into something else in a few moments' time, which is this worrying statistic. We have a chunk of young people, 16 to 24-year-olds, almost 1 million of them, not working, not training, not studying. My question is, why? We'll get to that next here on Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Friday evening, it's Talk, the home of common sense. I'm Duncan Barkes, I'm here through until 9. Peter Barnes, political strategist, is alongside me as well. We could have spent the whole of this show, 2 hours worth, just doing the Greens and the by-election stuff. But there is something else I'm keen to talk about, only because I genuinely don't understand why this is happening. And I rely on you as a viewer and a listener to talk, to maybe fill in the gaps. And I wanted to crowbar this into tonight's show. So these are the figures that have come out regarding, well, they're known as NEETs, right? And NEETs are people not in education, employment, training, right? NEETs. And the figure is almost 1 million. We're talking about 16 to 24-year-olds. Almost 1 million. The actual figure is 957,000. Okay, 16 to 24-year-olds in the UK were NEET in the latest figures that have been released. Now, we do know there is a weak job market at the moment, okay? So that might be a bit of a reason why you've got this massive chunk of people who ain't working, but they're also choosing not to study as well. So my question to you on Talk this evening is twofold. Why do you think this is, okay? Maybe you know someone in your family who falls into this group. They can't find work, or they're not interested in studying or training. Be good enough to give us a shout, and we can have that chat on Talk. this evening. But here's my bigger question, and I know I'm going to say, look, I'm not a baby boomer, I'm not a boomer, so it's no good going, OK, boomer, you don't understand the younger generations. I'm Generation X, right? We're well hard, all right? You know, when we were 16, we were doing Saturday jobs in the corner store, in the shop, you know, stacking shelves of baked beans and delivering newspapers. Gen X, right? Well, we're hard. We fought our way to the top. We didn't get, you know, half the helping hands that the boomer generation did. Don't at me, whatever you do, all right? So, but I'm aware that I'm going to sound like a really old git when I say this and ask you this question. What do these people do all day? What do they do? If they're not working, if they're not training, what are they doing? If they're not studying, what are they doing? 0344 499 1000. Only you can answer that question this evening. What the hell do they get up to? I mean, you can only watch reruns of, I don't know, Family Guy on the Freeview box for about a week before you've seen them all. What are they doing? And what are they living on? Is it the bank of mum and dad who are just funding them? Or is it taxpayers in this country who are having to fork out? I don't know the answers. I hope to get some between now and 9. Now let's talk about this. Serge Safay is Executive Head Teacher of St Thomas the Apostles School and joins us on Talk this evening. Good evening.
Good evening. How are you?
Very well indeed. What's your initial thought on this?
Well, people in education, old gits like me, I suppose, have been talking about this for a long, long time.
Yeah.
And I hope it stays relevant for a little while because you want to talk about the Greens and everything else. Because I think this is really important. First and foremost, and I think it's our generation, that's partly to blame, we are disincentivising our children to go to work. Why? Why should they go to work? They're not stupid and earn just as much money sitting on the backsides doing, as you said, goodness knows what all day, as opposed to go out and work 5 days a week.
Yeah.
So that's the first point. We should never have a society where you can earn as much money sitting down, especially if you're young, all right, as you can going out to work. Secondly, you would have noticed within the million not working, some of them are actually already qualified. They're graduates who can't get jobs. So let's talk about the university system. Why can't we just understand that the whole point of education is to lead to a job and to make sure that we produce citizens that can contribute positively to the society they're going to live in? Let's just start from there. And let's make damn sure if we're going to send them to university, if we're not going to send them on apprenticeships, which everyone keeps talking about, but I've been in this business for 50 years and I've seen a slow, gradual, steady decline in apprenticeships available for 16-18-year-olds who not necessarily are academics. At the same time, I've seen apprenticeships at the top end growing for those kids that have got 3 A stars who are going to be all right anyway, quite frankly.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the universities. And of course, we all know, the Mickey Mouse University courses that these children, and I'm guilty as anyone, because I haven't got alternatives, I'm horsewhipping some of these kids to university, knowing full well they're going to end up with goodness knows how much of debt. And luckily that's come to the fore as well. The scandal of the interest rates on these poor students is awful. But let's get back to the point.
Well, no, you make a good point there because, education's been turned into a business and it's failing our younger generations. But you're a sensible bloke, Serge. It comes across by the bucket load. What needs to change? What can we do to stop talking about the sheer amount of 16 to 24-year-olds who aren't working, aren't training, aren't studying?
Right,
what needs to change?
Number one, let's cut benefits. All right? They've got to earn any money they want. Fine, we can't stop their parents subbing them and having them sit on the sofa all day. That's parenting, which don't start me on that, okay?
Well, no, I want to start you on it for 30 seconds. Go on, give me half a minute on what's gone wrong with parenting.
It's just abdicating responsibility. People have forgotten about their responsibilities of bringing up children properly. No conversations. Do as you're told when it's right. When you make mistakes, don't give them a cuddle. Don't confuse them. Let's not look for another bleeding label because you're naughty. There's a label for you. All right, let's bring back some of these old labels. Naughty, lazy, disaffected, as opposed to the thousands of labels that everyone looks for to stop children taking responsibility when they go wrong or don't do the right thing. But going back quickly to universities, it would be very easy for you and I and any other sensible person. Let's look at these courses. Do you know what? Everyone wants a doctor. We all need engineers. When they do those university courses, that actually leads to a job that society needs, you know what? Let's waive the student fees, as long as they serve society for a number of years. If they want to go study the life and times of Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck, by all means, charge them through the nose. What you will then find out is that they'll go to university when it's important to society, as opposed to wasting their time and then becoming a burden on us anyway, because these dodgy courses, they're never going to pay back the 50, 60,000 that they owe. Guess who's going to pay it back? The taxpayer. Yeah. So lots of layers here. You can tell I'm quite frustrated about the topic, which is most probably why you're having me on, you know, and I do my very best to talk to parents and kids. You know, going to university is not the be and end all, all right? They've got lots of talent, but when do they get a chance? Because unfortunately, employers, they'd rather employ a fully qualified Eastern European person doing your plumbing, whatever it is, rather than get a snotty 16-year-old and maybe training them up. And that's what's got to change. We've got to incentivize people to give these kids a chance to show their talents and give it a go. We're not doing that, and it's our fault.
Serge, I think a lot of our audience and our viewers will be right on side with you. You're a man who talks a lot of sense. Pleasure to have you on Talk this evening. Thank you for your time. That's Serge Safai, Executive Head Teacher of St Thomas the Apostle School. I'm going to squeeze in this call because this is Brian in Rugby, who I believe has got a nephew who falls into this category, who potentially is one of the 957,000 16 to 24-year-olds who's not doing anything. He's not working, not training, not studying. Brian, what can you tell us?
Yeah, all he does is just sit in his room playing video games. Absolutely nothing. I've gone up there and I've said to him, look, you need to get off your backside, sorry for my language, and get out and get a job. If you don't want to get a job and you don't want to do anything, I'll bring back national service, shove them back in the army. Then they'll soon get a job then, won't they? Or go out litter picking, go out cleaning some old deer's garden. Do something for your dole money if you want to.
Well, yeah, maybe make a contribution to society. So we're talking about your nephew, right? So have you got any idea what your nephew does all day and all week? If he's not working or studying or training, what does he do?
Sit in his room playing video games.
Video games?
Yeah, he's on a computer, that's it. And his mum lets him do it. And me and her argue all the time about it, and I've just timed it now. But I believe that the government should start doing something with these kids that can't be asked to work and go out and get a job. Go and sign on. Go and, like, you've got to go and clean that old deer's garden, then you'll get your money. Or go and clean the toilets, and you get your money.
So Brian, this is a bit of a personal question. I just want to be clear so our viewers and listeners this evening to talk are clear. Do you know if your nephew does he get benefits? Does he get something?
Yeah, £300 a month.
£300 a month?
Yeah.
And do you know why he gets that?
It's to help him try and find work. It's I can't remember what kind of benefit it is now.
Yeah, it's a job seeker's allowance, I should imagine.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
And do you know if he's looking for work?
No, he doesn't. He just sits in his bed. Why should he when he gets £300 a month? That's what, it's just a joke. It really is.
And if I can ask, because I think is coming through loud and clear, a lot of frustration from yourself. I mean, are you working at the moment? Do you put in a shift every day?
I work 7 days a week.
Yeah.
I have a son that works 4 days a week. I have a friend of his that's come here from abroad. They've come here, they've got jobs.
Yeah.
They basically walk straight into a job when they both come in. Yeah. So there is work out there for these youngsters. It's just that they can't be bothered.
So interesting. Brian, have a good evening, and thank you so much for getting involved with us on Talk. That's Brian in Rugby. I mean, Peter, that kind of sums it up, doesn't it? There's a man who's grafting 7 days a week. The frustration about his nephew is off the scale, getting £300 a month as part of job seeker's allowance. But according to Brian there, his nephew's just playing video games all day.
I completely agree. And I will say that, can we just get that headmaster to be the Prime Minister, please? Because he spoke more sense on this issue than I have heard absolutely anybody else talk about it. Because you cannot blame children for being lazy and all the rest of it if you raised them to be like that. Yeah. Parenting is a really important responsibility. I didn't agree where he said that education is to lead to a job. I think that's a bit problematic. But I will say we have to do something, because we're going to end up like Europe, where they have an out-of-control youth unemployment problem that makes ours look like child's play, ironically. But you know, it is literally, I do put a lot of it down to lockdown.
Yeah.
Lockdown kind of got people used to sitting around not doing anything.
Yeah, and in some cases getting money from the state.
Exactly.
People have got used to it.
More important, and this was a report that came from the Taxpayers Alliance on it, the stigma of that was removed.
Yeah.
It's no longer kind of what are you doing that, you know, most other people our generations would kind of have. Most people now say, well, what else would you do?
Yeah, you're bang on the money. Listen, we've got 10 minutes of the show left. We're going to get as many calls on the air and as many messages as well. If you want to get in quick, 0344 499 1000, talking about your faith in the voting system and also talking about the Green Party. Do they concern you? This is Talk.
Every Monday to Wednesday, midnight until 1, it is Talkback.
Such a shortage of housing. You've got landlords, right, have taken that on board, and it's an absolute disgrace.
Your stories, your opinions, it is your chance to have your say. So they're literally just being rented out as hotels, basically.
Yeah, rented out as hotels.
Well, that has really shone a light for me.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Friday evening, it's Talk, the home of common sense. I'm Duncan Barkes, here for a final 10 minutes. Peter Barnes, political strategist, alongside me. A couple of calls to get to, but let's do these. You see, I'm a man who's true to his word. Going to do these messages. This is Betty, who says Duncan, apprenticeship system was ruined in the UK by unions and Blair government and the benefit system. 9 million Brits sitting on their backsides for 40 years. Only 2 million foreigners. I was hiring 140 people per year, now not hiring, says Betty. John in Angus says, I speak as a Reform member who campaigned in this election for 2 days. Farage has got to be very careful not to be looking on sour grapes. I don't think we would have won the election for what I have heard, but in another election, if it was a close result, it would have a major effect. So before the next general election, we need to have a long, hard look at how we can keep trust in our election system, says John in Angus. That feeds into your view, doesn't it?
Yep.
A couple more here. This is Elaine, who says, I live in Scotland and I do not understand how the SNP have managed to rig the system so that only they win every election. This is first and second vote. I don't like it. And as for postal voting, that's how I vote and like it, but I'd be willing to give that up now as the demographics have changed so much, and the way Muslims vote, for example, they vote the way whoever in the mosque tells them to. Yeah, there was some stuff, wasn't there, coming out of the by-election that there were senior community leaders who were just saying this is how you should vote.
Yes, it's a major problem, and it has been one for about 20 years, I'm afraid. We need to break that, and we need to break it very quickly. They hold a huge amount of influence over the community, and they have to be reined in. It's exactly how you ended up with the West Midlands problem and the police, and the influence of as community leaders. I mean, if you call yourself a community leader, I'm not going to view on you very well.
Catherine in Cardiff, I recently wrote to the Electoral Commission to ask why it is not necessary here in Wales to have to produce photo ID when voting in local government and Welsh Assembly elections, and was referred to an Assembly member because the decision rests with the devolved government. I am now awaiting a response from the latter, says Catherine.
Yes, it's going to be very interesting because Welsh elections have changed for the Senate, so that's going to be a huge factor. Scotland have their own systems. Let's not forget here, they're changing how they're going to do mayoral elections. This is also how the establishment is going to try to keep out reform. They're going to change how you actually can vote.
Yeah, absolutely right. Listen, let's get some calls on the air. Dan's in Liverpool. Hello, Dan.
Hello there, Duncan. I hope you're doing well. With the voting system, I do think there needs to be change. I don't think everyone should have the right to vote.
Sorry, who should have the right to vote or not have the right?
I think if you're on benefits or you're not working, you shouldn't be allowed to vote. And also...
Oh, hey, well, that's interesting. So if you don't work and you're not contributing to the system, you don't have the... You believe people shouldn't have the opportunity to vote?
I think everyone should be allowed to have the opportunity to vote, but you have to prove you have to be working. And I think before you vote, I think there has to be like a test, just a small test where it says each party's values, you have to tick a 10-question box, and if you can get a full mark, you're allowed to vote.
I think you'd end up with about 5 people in this country being able to vote if you did that.
I know. Also, when it comes to the Muslim vote, I'm going to say this as someone who's mixed race, father Muslim, mother Christian. I know 100% that a lot of people from the Muslim community get told how to vote. I want to ask, would it be illegal if a vicar or someone said in a church told everyone in that chapel how to vote?
I don't think it would be illegal, but I think it would be deemed as inappropriate. But this is the challenge we have, because there is evidence to suggest that community leaders or people in places of worship in the Muslim world will tell people how to vote. But it's difficult. How do you tackle it, right? It's a flashpoint moment, isn't it?
Definitely, because it's the power that individual has in the community that is the real... You know, whatever the imam says or the leaders of the mosque, that has a huge influence on the person standing in that community. And that's a really problem. I have to admit, though, I actually think we should raise the voting age.
Yeah, so do I.
Yeah, definitely. About 45, which is what you have to be to run to be president.
Yeah. Well, here's controversial for you. I think you should get 2 votes if you're in the higher tax band. You're contributing more to society.
It's interesting on the benefits thing, because most people are a net drain, not a net contributor. There's about 9 of us that are probably net contributors.
I know. Dan, thank you for your call. Only going to end it so I can talk to Mandy, who's in Haywards Heath. Hello, Mandy.
Hello.
What would you like to say?
Right, so I'm saying that I don't have any photo ID.
Right.
I own my flat. I've worked for 50 years, and that's why I would get a postal vote.
So you got a postal vote because what? You otherwise you'd have to go to the polling station. You've got no way of proving who you are.
Yeah, I would have no photo ID. I've got no passport or driving licence, and I'm 63, so I can't get a bus pass.
I thought
there is a system scheme.
You could get a card for people like Mandy.
I'd have to check, but there is something you could apply to get, and I think you actually get it for free because of this particular problem. There's also quite interesting, if you look at how they were going to roll out digital ID, they used the veterans because they're an older demographic to see whether what the actual kind of usage of these systems for older people, and it's actually shown that older people are better at it than younger people.
Mandy, thank you for your call. Have a good evening. This is Owen, who's in Budapest. Hello.
Well, you're talking about the elections right now, and everyone's blaming different demographics and appeals to different demographics. The simple fact is that less than half of the population bothered to turn up.
That's a huge yes.
I mean, that's the biggest thing I'm seeing right now, is that, what was it, 48%, 47%?
Well, let's talk. So, I think the Gorton and Denton turnout was around half, wasn't it? It was 50%. And typically, general election-wise, it tends to come in around 65, 66%.
The last one was the second lowest ever. And I actually have to admit, and I've said this for a long, long time, actually, that voter turnout will define who, in terms of the legitimacy of the government, because everyone says that Keir Starmer doesn't have a mandate because there's such a low turnout. I think even if Farage wins, it'll be on such a low turnout that he will not have the legitimacy to say that he has won some revolution.
Owen, do we need to look at an alternative system? Maybe, what Australia do, which is mandatory voting. I mean, if you don't vote, you get a fine.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. We are not going down the route of forcing people to vote, because that's so illegitimate. That's like conscription. It's saying.
But why is that such a bad thing for you? Because there is an argument. Let me put forward a quick one-sentence argument.
Your right to vote. Your right to vote is sacred.
Yeah, no, I understand that, but I'm just curious in this idea, because there are some people who will say, and I think I fall into this camp, that democracy is a very important thing. It's a valuable thing, and if you've got it, you should use it. So why not look at a mandatory voting system?
Well, something's only valuable to someone who values it. If you force me to vote, like you force me into conscription, then it has no legitimacy. I'm sorry, you cannot force people to vote.
Well, how about here's a compromise. You have on the ballot paper none of the above, so you can put a cross in that box. At least you've taken part in the system, and you've had your say, but you're not being forced to vote for a political party. Would that work for you?
I would support having. I've spoiled my ballot a couple of times because I've lived in constituencies that were so skewed one way or the other that it didn't really make any difference what I voted for. So I went in and I just spoiled my balance and then walked out again, because I believe that it's very important to be